Hi guys, this is Tamara. Thank you so much for coming back to my channel. Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about intergenerational trauma and the pathways to recovery model. I'm going to point out some of the difficulty that tends to perpetuate in families who have intergenerational trauma, and then I'm going to show you the pathways to recovery model so that you can see what the healing process usually entails or involves, right? I'll use that word. So we're going to focus on that, and then I'm going to also talk about risk and protective factors. I'm going to walk you through an activity. So thank you so much for coming back to my channel. For those who are subscribed and participating, thank you so much. And for those who are new to the channel, I encourage you to hit the subscribe button right up here so that you can stick around with us and be a part of our growing community. The benefits for you in today's video is that I'm going to highlight the pathways to recovery model. I'm going to walk you through an activity there, and then I'm going to highlight protective and risk factors. So I've been talking a lot about intergenerational trauma outside of YouTube because since this whole Corona thing started, I've gotten a lot of calls from overseas and different countries, and even right here in my country, asking about intergenerational trauma and how the coronavirus scare kind of triggers them, and it triggers their complex PTSD, and it triggers their fight or flight response. So I've been talking a lot about this topic outside of YouTube, but I've also been talking here over the past 2 weeks about intergenerational trauma, and focused last Thursday/Friday, focused on, basically the masks that we wear when it comes to intergenerational trauma. The healing process makes it complicated. And so it's important to really understand what that process is in order for you to actually begin that post-traumatic growth, which I'm going to be talking about as well on this channel during this month of intergenerational trauma. So let me just go ahead and point out some of the risk factors before we start talking about the recovery model. So some of the risk factors that causes intergenerational trauma may not happen all at once, okay? It may happen throughout the lifespan, or it may happen throughout generations. It really does depend on who the family is, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, what happens from year to year, from month to month, from time to time. Risk factors are not the same for everybody, so it really does just depend on one particular family and sometimes one particular individual. What may impact one family member, one sibling, or one husband or spouse may not impact the wife or a spouse or that other sibling. So I think that's important to kind of add to this as well, because one of the things I find when I'm talking to families about intergenerational trauma is there's a family member that says, well, why didn't I commit suicide? If my loved one died of suicide or successfully completed suicide because of the trauma that we had in our family, why am I still alive? Like, why didn't I do the same thing? What's different between me and them? And the reality is that risk factors and protective factors really do impact siblings and families very differently, and individuals within families. So I think that's important for me to point out. So what are risk factors? Well, risk factors are things that make us more vulnerable to experiencing the negative impact, I should say, of intergenerational trauma. There's risk factors, and then there's protective factors, okay? And protective factors are those things that makes, it a little bit easier for us to deal with the negative impact of intergenerational trauma. So I'm going to just highlight what these two things are. So let's start with risk factors. Risk factors includes things such as family violence. So that could be domestic violence, that could be incest. It could also be physical altercations between family members on a repeated or regular basis. It could be health problems that are traumatic, like diabetes or high cholesterol or stroke, heart attack, brain injuries, traumatic brain injuries, right? It could be even mental health conditions like schizophrenia, or anything that is going to create some kind of psychosis or hallucinations or delusions, okay? The next thing would be, a family who is involved in the child welfare system. So a family who's dealing with adoption or fostering children who are risky and dangerous and possibly getting into legal issues. It could also involve children being placed into Child Protective Services, right? Or CYF, Children, Youth, and Families getting involved, which is basically Child Protective Services, but in my state, it's called CYF, Children, Youth, and Families. So those agencies, I should call them, getting involved could be a risk factor as well. Okay, Child Protective Services coming in the home to investigate child abuse, any kind of child abuse, sexual abuse, rape, incest, all that stuff. You know, the Child Protective Service agencies reviewing documents and interviewing family members and pulling kids from homes. That can all be risk factors for challenges down the road. Okay, substance abuse, getting involved with drugs and alcohol at an early age, trying over-the-counter pills, narcotics like Percocet and Tramadol. You know, those kind of sedatives can really trigger, you know, an individual to go down the wrong road. The other thing that we need to keep in mind is gang involvement. Individuals or family members who are involved in gangs, they usually don't get out of those gangs. They either become so, you know, what's the word? Kind of like enculturated or influenced by the gang environment that they never get out of it, right? They just kind of get more involved in it, and they get more involved in it until it's rock bottom, and then they say, okay, I need to turn around. But for the most part, gang involvement is not healthy because, you know, it's going to take you down a rocky road. It's going to introduce you to sex crimes. It's going to introduce you possibly to trafficking. It's going to introduce you possibly to drug abuse or drug selling of drugs or other substances. So it's a bad road. So gang involvement is usually a high risk factor for continual problems down the road. Having a prison sentence, okay? Some people go to jail and go to prison, and they have a prison sentence, or they're on house arrest or probation, and they find God, or they find some spiritual awakening and they get on a better path. But then there are also some individuals who just continue to get worse as they are, you know, trying to live out their prison sentence or trying to complete probation. Also, homelessness, that's another risk factor. Homelessness often tends to occur amongst the mentally ill or substance abusers. And so there's two risk factors right there: mental illness and homelessness, or substance abuse and homelessness. Okay, so those two risk factors together, or any of these risk factors together, can lead to a worsening of someone's status in society and within a family. Okay, so these are the risk factors that tend to show up in families with intergenerational trauma. It just seems to be the way things go. Okay, now protective factors are considered those things that protects an individual from further damage. Okay, so let's say there's intergenerational trauma within the family, and there's a lot of chaos, and there's a lot of abuse, and there's a lot of risk factors. Well, if that child is adopted by a middle or higher class family with income, that has a loving family that gives him or her a foundation in the world, that puts that child into sports, gets them, you know, into exercise and nutrition and good education and a good school, and gives them opportunities, those protective factors can actually shield you and kind of cloak the risk factors that you have been exposed to or that you may have experienced. So protective factors are there to kind of cloak you or cover you and ensure that you're going to move forward in a healthy fashion and move forward without those risk factors impacting you in the long term. Okay, so risk and protective factors are extraordinarily important to keep in mind, because the greater number of risk factors that somebody experiences, the less likely they are to bounce back and have a better life. The more protective factors a person has in their favor, right, the less likely they're going to be impacted by risk factors and other negative things that stems from intergenerational trauma. Okay, so let's just talk about what happens. I want to talk about the recovery model, and I want to highlight some things that happens, and I encourage you to walk with me in this. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through an activity. So let me grab a Sharpie here so that you guys can see exactly what I'm going to be doing here. And I'm going to walk you through this because I think that this is an activity that can be very helpful to you. It's kind of like a self-reflection. It's kind of like a, here's an activity to kind of look at your invisible wounds and see exactly what's going on the inside of you. Okay, so here's what I want you guys to do. Okay, you're going to get a blank piece of paper, right? You probably should do this when you watch some of my educational videos, just to be, ready. But that's a running joke in my office. Sometimes my kids will come in, and my adult families and so forth, my teenagers, and they'll say, Miss Tamara, I got a piece of paper and a clipboard, because they know how I do. So that's like a running joke in my office here. But so go ahead and get a piece of paper out and go ahead and draw a triangle. And you want a medium-sized triangle. All right, so you're going to draw a medium-sized triangle on your paper, and it's going to just look like that, okay? Now, this triangle is the recovery model of intergenerational trauma, and we're talking about the invisible wounds of that trauma, okay? So what you're going to put at the very top, at the tip right here, is powerlessness. You're going to write down powerlessness and lack of control. Okay, and this is usually what happens in families, in cultures, and in communities of intergenerational trauma. There's a general sense of powerlessness and lack of control, and there's an internal sense of powerlessness and lack of control as well. So that's going to be at the tip, okay? What's going to be on the left side of that triangle? All right, so this is your... No. This is your left, my right. So you're going to, oh God. So you're going to be writing on this side, trauma and hopelessness, okay? Because again, you know, these are two characteristics. I can't write and talk at the same time. Helplessness, okay? Helplessness, or you can make it hopelessness, okay? These are basically the 2 or 3 characteristics that are experienced in families, in cultures, and communities of intergenerational trauma, okay? So helplessness, hopelessness, and trauma, okay? And then on this side, you're going to write 3 words. You're going to write loss, grief, and disconnection, okay? So loss, grief, and disconnection. Now, what I want you to do with this activity is what you're going to do, because these things connect to each other. That's really what this is showing, is that this is a cycle. And this is basically all of the things that you're feeling when you're dealing with intergenerational trauma, whether that's within your community, within your family, or within your particular ethnic culture. I have 2 ethnic cultures that has been greatly impacted by intergenerational trauma, and that's the African American side of my bloodline, and that's the Native American side of my bloodline. Now, the Native American side of my bloodline is Cherokee, and I was able to do a DNA test so many years ago, and I found that in my DNA structure, and I did not realize that we had a strong percentage of Cherokee descent in our family. And what I found was, you know, a long history of intergenerational trauma dating back way before my great-grandmother. You know, I'm trying to think, is my great-grandmother on my mom's side? Yeah, great-grandmother on my mom's side. So before she was even born, there was a lot of intergenerational trauma on her side of the family with the Cherokee culture. And maybe one day I'll share that with you. It's pretty depressing, and yet I think it's pretty important because we can look throughout history culturally and see that Native Americans have experienced intergenerational trauma, right? You know, they've been really abused, and they've dealt with slaughter, and they've dealt with things not going the way that they had anticipated. And we know for sure that African Americans have been enslaved for decades, and they are still going through institutionalized slavery. So those are 2 cultures that deal with intergenerational trauma. And so what you're going to see in that culture are these 3 things, right? You're going to see powerlessness and lack of control. You're going to see trauma and helplessness or hopelessness. And you're going to see loss, grief, and disconnection. So what I want you to do with this triangle is just take a little bit of time and reflect upon this triangle for yourself. Now, you know, you can jot little notes down as you go on this paper. You can use it as like a map for yourself and just jot down some things. Like right under powerlessness and lack of control, you can document what, you know, in your life has been impacted by that. When you look at loss, grief, and disconnection, you can jot down, you know, how you've been impacted by loss, grief, and feeling disconnected. When you look at trauma, helplessness, and hopelessness, you can jot down what that has been like for you. You can also jot down family members, right? This family member experienced this and this is why. So you can kind of use this as a little bit of a diary or a map for yourself. And it may be helpful to say, here you go, to your therapist and say, I just want you to look at some of the work I've done about trauma in my family. So that's one way that you can deal with this model, or that you can use it. Now, let me teach you about the recovery side of this, okay? So, this is the intergenerational model, but then there's also a recovery piece of this model, okay? So the recovery piece of this model, you're going to draw that triangle again, and you can do this at home with me as well. So you want to draw that triangle again, okay? It's going to look like that. And you're going to put up at the top self-determination. Okay, so self-determination, I'm trying to think what the other one is. Self-determination, governance, which means, you basically have the ability to govern things in your life or in your community or within your family, right? You have a sense of control, okay? And the next one is going to be community. Okay, so you have a sense of community. So it's going to look a little bit like this. Okay, so you're going to have at the top self-determination, governance, and community. So this is one area of the recovery model that's essential for healing. Having that self-determination, having that governance or that ability to will things, and having that community to provide that support base for you, that foundation, is essential for recovery, okay? Now on the left, you're gonna write community and resilience, okay? Community and resilience. And in addition to resilience, you're also going to add, restoration. Okay, so these are three things that you're going to need to recover from intergenerational trauma as well. Okay, so that would be restoration, community, and resilience. There's that community word again. Having that support system, that social support system, maybe even just a family support, whatever it may be, your spousal support, you're going to need that support to recover from intergenerational trauma. Okay, and on the right side of this, oh my God, I hate when things are in my eyes, guys. My Lord, I'm so sorry. We're going to do community again. Okay, so community life. Okay, and then we're also going to put on the right side reconnection. Okay. All right, so basically what this means is we have community life, right? So you're engaging in the community, you're giving back, you're being engaged, you're volunteering, you're working, you're being kind to people, you're offering your support and your help, and you're getting that in return. And then reconnection, right? You're reconnecting with these essential parts of your world in order to turn things around with intergenerational trauma. I think the healing process with intergenerational trauma is multifaceted. So you kind of, you have to have these various components in order to heal. I also think too, this is most important with cultural intergenerational trauma. This is, to me, more, it relates more to cultural intergenerational trauma, but you can also take some of this as tips for healing your personal and your family intergenerational trauma as well. I'm going to talk about post-traumatic growth in the upcoming videos, guys. And I will give you some information on what the healing process looks like for those of us who have a long history of intergenerational trauma. So we will get to that. Thank you so much, guys, for being with me in today's video. I encourage you to give it a thumbs up if it was helpful, and go ahead and hit that subscribe button right over there so you can stick around with us and continue to grow and to learn within our community. And I will see you guys on Wednesday. We're going to continue these conversations and continue to grow. Let me know if you have questions about any of this and how this applies to your life and if it does at all. So let me know. All right, guys, I'll see you Wednesday. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you soon. Bye.